The Galactic Assembly was unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. A cathedral of stars and light, it floated in the void above a shattered planet, its crystal dome stretching miles into the cosmos. Within, delegates from over 1,000 intelligent species had gathered, beings with forms that defied logic, with skin like molten metal, feathers made of energy, or shapes that twisted and shimmered as they moved. Their eyes, countless in number and variety, watched as the human ship, small and unassuming by comparison, glided silently into the chamber. Commander Kale Vera stood at the head of the human delegation, his broad shoulders squared, his gaze steady. Behind him, diplomat Lyra Solen moved with quiet grace, scanning the chamber with measured eyes. Their crew followed, all humans, each wearing the standard gray and navy uniforms of the United Earth Coalition. There were no flags waving, no drums announcing their arrival. They entered not with fanfare but with a deliberate, calm presence that seemed almost alien to the rest of the assembly. The chamber fell silent, or as close to silence as 1,000 species could manage. Conversations halted mid-word, the rustle of appendages against floors ceased, and the ambient glow of bioluminescent skin dimmed as all eyes turned toward the newcomers. Even the usual hum of the assembly, a constant undercurrent of conversation, negotiation and subtle threats, seemed to fade. High Chancellor Vorthan rose from his throne, a towering figure of ever-shifting light and shadow, his form constantly fracturing and reforming in ways that made the floor vibrate with perception. His voice, amplified by the chamber's resonance fields, rumbled like distant thunder. "Representatives of humanity," he said, his tone measured but commanding, "you have arrived unbidden. State your purpose before the council." Kale stepped forward. His expression was calm, almost serene, but his voice cut through the hall with precision. "We are here to observe. And to remind this council that the galaxy is not governed by power alone, but by will, vision, and resolve." The words caused a ripple of disbelief. Some delegates laughed quietly, unable to comprehend the audacity of mere humans daring to speak in the Galactic Assembly. Others leaned forward, curious, sensing a confidence they could not yet explain. Lyra mirrored Kale's composure, her hands clasped before her, her eyes sweeping the room with quiet intelligence. Vorthan's form pulsed with agitation. "Observation? Humans, you step into a chamber where centuries of governance, treaties, and wars define authority. You speak of will and vision, but what power do you wield? What fleets? What weapons?" Kale inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging a trivial question. "Our power is not measured in fleets or weapons," he said evenly. "It is measured in understanding, in patience, and in the choice to act, or to walk away." A murmur spread through the chamber. Delegates exchanged looks of skepticism, incredulity, and some, for the first time in their lives, a flicker of unease. The human's calmness was unnerving. In a room where threats, subterfuge, and grand displays of force were the norm, two humans walked in with nothing but their presence, and it was enough to command attention. From the back of the chamber, Ambassador Rilth of the SRL hissed under his breath, his multiple eyes narrowing. "They bring nothing. No fleets, no weapons. Are they fools or mad?" Lyra, though silent, seemed to sense the whisper, her gaze momentarily fixing on Rilth with a look that communicated quiet certainty. It was a look that said, "We are not here to play by your rules, but to remind you of your own." The council erupted into whispers and debates. Species that had long-standing grudges pointed fingers at one another, arguing over the human's audacity. Delegates of the Luminaris, beings of pure energy, flickered rapidly in agitation. "Why are we giving attention to a species that barely spans a single star system?" one Luminaris counselor asked. Kale's expression remained unchanged. He had anticipated this reaction. The humans had not come to conquer, negotiate, or manipulate. They had come to observe, to expose the cracks in a council that prided itself on order while teetering on the edge of chaos. Lyra finally spoke, her voice soft but clear, reaching every corner of the chamber. "We do not come with demands. We do not come with threats. We come with a question. Are you prepared to govern yourselves responsibly? Or will the galaxy fracture under your indecision?" The words hung in the air like a tangible force. Vorthan's form flickered, his frustration visible even through the alien language of light and shape. He tried to interrupt, to reassert authority, but Kale raised a hand, a gesture both simple and commanding. Silence fell once more. At that moment, every delegate realized something profound. Humans did not seek power through intimidation. They did not need to prove themselves through displays of strength. Their mere presence, calm, deliberate, and unwavering, demanded a response from a council used to bending others to its will. It was a different kind of power, one that many species had never encountered. As the humans took their assigned seats, the room's energy shifted. Old rivalries simmered. Species that had considered themselves invincible began to second-guess the solidity of their alliances. The humans spoke little, yet their silence screamed louder than any argument, any display of force. From a side chamber, Seraph of the Luminaris muttered to a nearby aide, "They are unshakable. It is not their strength but their presence. It is terrifying." Kale and Lyra did not respond. They did not need to. The chamber had already registered their intent. Humans had walked into the heart of galactic power not to fight, not to plead and not to bargain, but to simply exist as a mirror to the rest of the council. In that mirror, the council saw its hubris, its indecision and its fragility. Vorthan's form finally stabilized, though his glow was uneven, a sign of internal agitation. "Humans," he said slowly, deliberately, "your arrival is unprecedented. Your intent is unclear. You will have the floor when the council decides how to proceed." Kale inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the ruling without submission. Lyra's eyes scanned the chamber once more, taking in the murmuring delegates, the tension hanging in the air, and the unspoken recognition growing among the assembly. Humans were not here to bend to their rules, but to observe and perhaps to teach them a lesson they could not yet comprehend. The humans' presence was quiet, almost understated, yet it carried a weight the galaxy had not anticipated. For the first time in millennia, the council felt truly uneasy, not because of force or firepower but because of clarity, courage, and restraint. The humans had arrived, and the ripples of their presence began spreading through every corner of the Galactic Assembly. Even before a word was fully spoken, the delegates understood. This was not the arrival of conquerors. This was something far more dangerous to the established order, a species that could walk in silence, look upon the council with unwavering eyes, and hold a power no weapon could measure. The Assembly, for all its grandeur and history, had just received a visitor it could neither control nor intimidate. And in the void beyond the crystal domes, stars twinkled as if in quiet approval. Humanity had arrived. The chamber of the Galactic Assembly had barely settled from the shock of humanity's arrival when Lyra Solen stepped forward. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, each step measured against the thrumming energy of the Assembly. Every delegate, from the tiniest microbe-intelligent species to the towering, crystalline Vorthan, watched her closely. The air itself seemed to tighten, as though the council collectively held its breath. Lyra raised a single hand and spoke, her voice calm yet resonant, carrying through the acoustics of the chamber without amplification. "We bring no fleets. We bring no weapons. We bring no demands. We bring only cooperation, and a question." Murmurs erupted immediately. The SEO delegates hissed at each other, their multi-jointed limbs waving in agitation. The Luminaris counselors flickered, sparks of light crackling in their energy forms. Even the normally stoic Terwinen of the Voidborn recoiled slightly, their translucent carapace shimmering with disbelief. Lyra's gaze swept over the room, calm, almost serene. "Are you ready to act, or will your politics leave the galaxy in decay?" The question hit like a thunderclap. The Assembly, used to long-winded speeches filled with threats, promises, and bureaucratic jargon, was stunned by the simplicity of the proposition. To act or to fail. Nothing more. Nothing less. High Chancellor Vorthan shifted, his form pulsing erratically. "Humanity," he said, voice low but resonant, "your words are insufficient. This council governs trillions of beings across 1,000 systems. Our deliberations are centuries in the making. What is your purpose here if not to wield power or influence?" Kale Vera's hand rose in a gesture of calm restraint. He did not need to speak, his presence alone carried weight. But when he did, his voice was deliberate, carrying a subtle but undeniable authority. "Our purpose is not to wield power over you. Our purpose is to see clearly, beyond pride, beyond fear, beyond petty squabbles. This council speaks of order, yet it teeters on chaos. We are here to show you what inaction truly costs." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates argued across species lines, voices overlapping in a symphony of indignation and disbelief. Some laughed outright at the audacity of humans, while others whispered nervously to their neighbors. The Kalthor warlords slammed their claws on the metallic floor, demanding explanation. The Asiril hissed, "Are these beings fools or mad?" Yet, despite the uproar, the humans remained utterly composed. Kale and Lyra did not shout, did not gesture violently, did not even flinch at the growing hostility. Their silence, measured and deliberate, was a mirror reflecting the council's own failings. Every accusation, every insult, every threat of action bounced back against the assembly itself, amplified by the quiet patience of humanity. One counselor, Seraph of the Luminaris, leaned toward his aide, whispering with a flicker of awe in his luminous form. They do not react. They do not fear. And yet, somehow they hold power over this room. Lyra continued, her voice calm but resonant, each word carefully chosen. We ask nothing of you. We do not seek to dominate, to manipulate, or to deceive. You have the freedom to govern yourselves. But we ask, will you choose responsibility, or will you allow inaction to consume you? The question was simple, yet its impact was profound. Delegates paused, some blinking multiple eyes in confusion, others folding appendages over torsos in deep consideration. It was not a threat. It was not a plea. It was a challenge, and unlike any the council had ever encountered. Vorthan's form flickered violently, a rare sign of internal conflict. Your rhetoric is dangerous, he said almost to himself. You speak as though your silence carries more weight than centuries of law, fleets, and diplomacy. Kale's lips curved into a subtle smile, the first human gesture of amusement the assembly had seen. Sometimes, he said softly, silence speaks louder than any fleet. Sometimes, observation and restraint reveal truths that power alone cannot. The council's chaos intensified. Species that had long feuded now turned their ire on one another, each blaming the other for the human's presence and message. Trade alliances wavered. Military pacts frayed. Ancient grudges were dredged up and shouted across the chamber. Humanity had done nothing, yet everything had changed. From the back of the chamber, Ambassador Rilth of the SEO hissed, his many eyes narrowing. They have done nothing. Nothing. And yet we are in chaos. What sorcery is this? It was no sorcery. It was simply human composure, intelligence, and clarity. Humans did not react to intimidation, bribery, or manipulation. They did not respond with anger or aggression. Instead, they watched, evaluated, and stood firm in their principles. And in doing so, they exposed the council for what it truly was: fragile, divided, and incapable of unified action. A younger delegate, a species called Xerans, trembled as she whispered to her companion, I feel like they're holding a mirror to us. And I don't like what I see. Lyra's gaze caught the murmur. She allowed herself a faint nod, almost imperceptible. It was enough to send a shiver through the chamber, subtle yet undeniable. The humans were aware. They saw everything. And their awareness was a form of quiet judgment. Vorthan finally raised his voice, attempting to reassert authority. Humanity, you have arrived, spoken, and made this council uneasy. State clearly, what do you intend to do if we fail to act? Kale's reply was measured, almost casual, but it carried the weight of inevitability. We do not intend to act. That is your responsibility. If the galaxy collapses under your indecision, it will not be our doing. It will be yours. The chamber fell silent for a moment, a rare pause where even the most vocal delegates could not find words. The magnitude of Kale's statement sank in. The humans did not threaten. They did not demand. They did not promise protection or intervention. They simply observed, and left the consequences entirely in the hands of the council. Even Vorthan's radiant form dimmed slightly, the High Chancellor struggling to maintain composure. This is unprecedented. Never before has a species dared to confront the council in such a manner. Kale's gaze did not waver. Unprecedented, yes. Effective even more so. You have all the tools, the knowledge, and the history to govern wisely. Yet you bicker, you argue, and you hesitate. Our presence merely illuminates what you already know, and what you have long ignored. The chamber's energy shifted subtly. Delegates glanced at one another with unease, realizing that the humans' power did not lie in fleets or weapons, but in perception, clarity, and restraint. Every argument, every alliance, every act of subterfuge now seemed petty in comparison to the calm, deliberate presence of humanity. And then Lyra took a step back, her statement concluded, her offer hanging in the air like a challenge no one could ignore. Humans had entered the assembly, made no threats, given no ultimatums, and yet the entire council was thrown into disarray. Somewhere in the chamber, a single voice, tentative and trembling, whispered, "They don't need to fight us, and yet somehow we are already losing." Humans had made their offer. Not of power, not of domination, not even of negotiation, but of judgment, observation, and the simple demand to act responsibly. And in doing so, they had changed the course of the council forever. The galaxy, vast and ancient, had never faced humans in this way, and the echoes of their quiet authority were only beginning to ripple through the stars. The humans' offer had settled over the Galactic Assembly like a shadow at dusk, quiet, pervasive, and impossible to ignore. 4 days, the chamber remained in a state of simmering tension. The alien delegates, who were used to endless debate, negotiation, and displays of power, found themselves caught in a strange limbo. Humans had said nothing more than what had already been spoken in Part 2, yet the impact resonated far deeper than any weapon, decree, or fleet could. Kale Vera and Lyra Solen did not speak unless necessary. They attended the council meetings with their usual calm precision, observing every movement, listening to every word, and allowing the assembly to unravel around them. The human silence was deliberate. It was a test, a mirror held up to the galaxy, and every alien present felt its unsettling weight. Delegates argued more fiercely than ever. The Kalthor warlords, who once relied on brute force and intimidation to control negotiations, now found themselves flustered. Their carefully constructed threats lost meaning when humans did not flinch, did not respond, and made no concessions. Even minor insults bounced off Kale's stoic expression like water off stone. From the gallery of observers, Sereth of the Luminaris whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of heated discussion. "Do you see it? They do not react. Every insult, every threat, every attempt to provoke, they simply endure. And yet, we are unsettled." It was true. The human silence had become a weapon more effective than any artillery or fleet. Every alien species, long accustomed to asserting power through displays of force, now faced a challenge they had never encountered, an unshakable calm that made them question their own authority. Even the young Xerans, normally timid and compliant in council matters, found themselves staring at Kale and Lyra with a mixture of awe and fear. "It's not that they are stronger than us," she whispered to a colleague, "it's that they do not react. And somehow, that makes them more powerful than anyone here." Within the chamber, alliances began to strain. Species that had worked together for centuries turned on each other, their grievances resurfacing under the pressure of human scrutiny. Trade disputes escalated into near-violent confrontations. Strategic pacts were questioned and denounced. Every faction, in one way or another, began to feel the weight of the human's presence, not through action but through sheer observation and restraint. The High Chancellor Vorthan found himself increasingly frustrated. His form flickered violently as he struggled to maintain control over the assembly. "Humans," he growled, "you have been here for days. You observe, you watch, and you say nothing. What is the meaning of this?" Kale's eyes met Vorthan's calmly. No words were spoken, yet the answer was clear. Humanity was holding the council accountable, not through speech but through presence. Their silence demanded reflection, and reflection made the delegates uncomfortable. They could no longer hide behind rhetoric, tricks, or intimidation. Humans had stripped the council bare of pretense, exposing weaknesses in diplomacy, judgment, and courage that no alien observer had dared confront before. Ambassador Rilth of the SRLO was losing patience. His many eyes blinked rapidly as he hissed, "How can they do nothing and yet control this room? What sorcery is this?" It was no sorcery. It was clarity. It was humanity. Lyra Solen, standing a few paces from Kale, tilted her head slightly as she observed the council's unraveling. Her gaze swept over species arguing over border disputes, trade agreements, and old rivalries. She did not intervene, did not raise her voice, did not attempt to calm the chaos. The human's power lay in allowing the galaxy to see itself, and the sight was chaotic indeed. Even the Tirwenen of the Voidborn, usually calm and calculating, found their translucent carapace dimming with unease. They are not engaging. And yet I cannot stop thinking about them. They are watching everything. Judging everything. The most striking effect of humanity's silence was how it forced introspection. Delegates began to question themselves, their motives, and their strategies. Every faction realized, consciously or not, that their attempts to dominate or manipulate were ineffective. Not because humans could not respond, but because humans chose not to react until the consequences of failure became unavoidable. The calm of humanity's presence had begun to ripple through the Galactic Assembly like an unseen tide. Delegates whispered about the quiet power of Kale Vera and Lyra Solen, their influence growing without a single weapon raised. Yet, curiosity soon turned into frustration and frustration into challenge. The first to act was warrior Princess Zyra of Kalthor, a fearsome figure towering over most delegates, her crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's shifting light. Her many eyes glimmered with disdain as she approached the humans, claws tapping rhythmically against the polished floor. "You have observed long enough, humans," Zyra said, her voice a resonant growl amplified by the chamber. "If you claim to possess insight, then prove it. A duel of strategy, your wit against mine. Let us see if your so-called clarity is worth the council's notice." A ripple of murmurs ran through the assembly. Duels of strategy were a Calthor tradition, where military minds were tested in simulations that replicated battles across entire star systems. No species had ever dared challenge a Calthor directly, and no human had ever faced one. Kale's expression did not change. He inclined his head respectfully. "We accept. But know this, we will not fight to destroy. We will fight to reveal the truth." Zyra's eyes narrowed, the tension between them crackling like ion storms. A holographic battlefield appeared in the center of the chamber, spanning hundreds of meters in 3 dimensions. Planets, fleets, and strategic assets materialized as glowing projections. Delegates leaned forward, some to gawk, others to judge, and many to place bets on Zyra's inevitable victory. The duel began. Zyra immediately launched a series of calculated attacks, testing Kale's ability to respond under pressure. The holographic fleets moved like living organisms, striking, retreating, and repositioning with ruthless efficiency. Kale, however, did not panic. He observed every movement, every shift in Zyra's tactics, calculating weaknesses invisible to even the most seasoned Calthor strategists. Minutes stretched into tense hours. Delegates held their breath, unable to look away. Zyra unleashed an unexpected maneuver, attempting a feint that had toppled entire fleets in real war games. Yet Kale anticipated it, countering with a strategy so elegant in its simplicity that the holographic projection shifted in a perfect defensive formation. Lyra watched quietly from the sidelines, her calm presence reminding all observers that humans did not rely on brute force or aggression. They relied on perception, intelligence, and the subtle ability to exploit patterns others could not see. Zyra's attacks grew more frantic. Every plan she executed, every tactic she deployed, was met by Kale's unshakable analysis. Slowly, the princess began to realize the truth. Humans were not constrained by tradition or pride. They saw solutions not by following precedent, but by understanding the underlying principles of conflict itself. In the final moments of the duel, Kale executed a maneuver so precise it encircled Zyra's simulated fleets completely without a single loss of his own forces. The holographic battlefield stabilized, showing Kale's position as dominant, not through overwhelming power but through superior insight and strategy. The chamber erupted in stunned silence. Zyra, her form radiating shock and reluctant respect, lowered her claws. "Impossible," she muttered, her voice trembling. You are not like any strategist I have faced." Kale's reply was simple, almost understated. Strategy is not about who moves faster or hits harder. It is about seeing the whole system and knowing the right moment to act. The effect on the assembly was immediate. Whispers turned into cautious speculation. Humans, it seemed, were capable of understanding concepts that even the most advanced alien minds could not. They could see patterns, anticipate moves, and execute plans with precision that defied conventional logic. But the council was not yet done testing humanity. Delegates from VRWNN, a species renowned for psychological manipulation, stepped forward. "If your strength lies in strategy alone," their leader said, voice rippling like water, "we will see how you handle deception and subterfuge." A complex simulation was projected, this time a scenario of political intrigue, trade manipulations, and hidden agendas. Delegates whispered advice, misled allies, and plotted to undermine one another, expecting the humans to falter under pressure. Kale and Lyra, as always, remained calm. Where others would see chaos, they saw patterns. Where others would succumb to confusion, they saw clarity. Slowly, methodically, they navigated the web of intrigue, identifying hidden agendas, predicting manipulations, and countering subterfuge with minimal intervention. By the end of the exercise, every secret plot had been exposed, every manipulation predicted, and every alliance tested without a single human loss. Delegates gasped. Some whispered words of disbelief. Others muttered curses under their breath, unable to comprehend how 2 humans could outmaneuver centuries of combined political cunning. Even High Chancellor Vorthan, struggling to maintain his composure, admitted quietly to his aide, They see the threads of power as though they were laid bare. And yet, they do not touch them unless necessary." Unsettling. The tests continued over several days. Humans were challenged in warfare simulations, economic disputes, and even philosophical debates meant to trap them into contradictions. Each time they responded not with arrogance or aggression, but with clarity, foresight, and calm reasoning. It became apparent to every species present that humans did not need to dominate through force. Humans dominated by outthinking, outlasting, and outmaneuvering expectations. They had turned the Council's challenges into opportunities to demonstrate a form of power that was completely alien to the galaxy. One rooted not in fear but in knowledge, observation, and unwavering composure. By the end of the week, the Council had transformed. Delegates whispered about humanity not as equals but as anomalies. They could not be ignored, they could not be intimidated, and they could not be provoked into rash action. Humanity's power had revealed itself not in strength or weaponry, but in the quiet ability to expose the flaws, weaknesses, and failures of the greatest assembly in the galaxy. Lyra finally allowed herself a small smile as she watched delegates squirm under the weight of their own shortcomings. Kale, ever composed, simply nodded once and returned to his seat. The tests had proven one undeniable truth. Humans were not bound by tradition, fear, or expectation. They played by rules entirely their own. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of something long forgotten. Power is not measured by fleets, armies, or manipulation. True dominance often lies in patience, observation, and the ability to let others reveal their own weaknesses, while remaining calm, unshakable, and entirely human. By the end of the day, one whispered observation spread through the chamber like wildfire: they fight without fighting. They win without striking. How is this even possible? The answer the humans knew was simple: because they were human. And humanity had arrived. Kale's calmness was a quiet storm. Lyra's serenity was a mirror reflecting the Council's flaws. And together they were proving a truth that no alien race had yet internalized. Strength is not measured by weapons or fleets alone, but by composure, foresight, and the ability to let others reveal their true selves. In one corner, a minor delegate from the planet Erythra whispered, I can feel it. Their silence, it makes me question everything I've fought for. And it scares me. Another voice, this one from the Vyrwanin Council, murmured, we are losing control without them even speaking. How is that possible? It was possible because humans did not play by the Council's rules. They had arrived as equals in presence alone, yet their refusal to conform to the alien expectations of aggression, coercion, or manipulation destabilized centuries of assumed hierarchy. They were proof that a species could exert influence simply by existing with clarity and purpose. Vorthan, sensing the growing unrest, attempted to reassert authority. Humans, you will speak. Will you provide guidance, direction, or intervention, or are you here merely to mock this assembly? Kale's gaze remained steady. Finally he spoke, but only a few words, enough to resonate across the chamber without breaking the humans' disciplined calm. We are not here to intervene. We are here to observe. You will govern yourselves, or fail. The consequences are yours to bear. The chamber was thrown into further turmoil. Delegates shouted over one another, accusing neighbors, allies, and even themselves of incompetence and weakness. Long-standing treaties were questioned. Trade agreements collapsed. And yet, amidst the chaos, the humans stood silently, unshaken, their presence a constant reminder that the galaxy's greatest threat was often its own indecision. Sereth of the Luminaris finally leaned toward an aide, whispering in awe and fear, they do nothing, and yet they are already victorious. I have never felt such power from silence before. That was the essence of the silent warning. Humanity did not need to fight. Humanity did not need to command. Humanity simply needed to exist, to observe, to endure, and to reflect the Council's flaws back upon itself. And in doing so, the galaxy had never felt more fragile. Even the youngest delegates, those who had grown up hearing tales of human weakness or insignificance, could not deny the truth. These beings were unshakable, calm, and entirely confident in their principles. And so, for days that stretched into weeks, humans attended the Council without speaking except when necessary, letting the Assembly's chaos unfold naturally. They became a silent mirror, reflecting the Council's failures, fears, and indecision. Every glance, every gesture, every measured movement carried weight far beyond what the Council had expected from a species so seemingly small and unassuming. By the end of the week, whispers spread throughout the chamber, they do not fight, and yet, we are undone. The humans had delivered their silent warning. The galaxy, vast and fractured, had been forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Strength without wisdom, power without restraint, and authority without purpose were meaningless. Humanity had shown that dominance could be expressed not through violence, but through presence, clarity, and unwavering calm. The council, once a symbol of order and unity, now simmered in chaos, all because two humans chose to walk among them in silence and simply observe. And far beyond the chamber, in the quiet expanse of space, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as if to witness the quiet, deliberate power of humanity. Weeks had passed since humanity had arrived at the Galactic Assembly, and the Council, once a symbol of order and power, teetered on the edge of chaos. Delegates had grown restless, alliances strained, and old rivalries, long dormant, were resurfacing with unprecedented ferocity. Everywhere Kale Vera and Lyra Solen went, their calm presence seemed to amplify every insecurity, every suspicion, and every unspoken fear within the chamber. No one had expected mere humans to have such an effect. They had not fired a single weapon, passed a single decree, or wielded any authority recognized by interstellar law. And yet, the Council's stability began to crumble. High Chancellor Vorthen paced before the assembly, his form flickering like unstable light. "Enough," he thundered, but his words carried little weight. Delegates were already shouting over one another, accusing neighbors of sabotage, manipulation, or cowardice. Wars that had been simmering for centuries threatened to reignite within hours, and the Council's diplomats could do nothing to stem the tide. Kale and Lyra observed silently from their seats. They did not intervene, did not speak, and did not flinch as the room spiraled into disorder. Their stillness became a focal point, an unshakable island amid the storm of chaos. And slowly, delegates began to realize the uncomfortable truth. The humans were not the cause of this turmoil, they were merely revealing it. Ambassador Rilth of the SEO hissed at a nearby aide, multiple eyes narrowing in frustration. "We are being humiliated by our own council. How can a species that does nothing do this to us?" Lyra's gaze swept over the assembly, calm and unwavering. She did not need to answer, the truth was already clear. The humans had forced the council to confront its greatest weakness, its inability to act decisively, united, or wisely. Every dispute, every betrayal, every hesitation was laid bare, amplified by humanity's silent presence. In a rare moment of clarity, Vorthen attempted to regain control. "Humans, you have observed long enough. Speak now. Tell us what must be done. Guide us before this assembly collapses entirely." Kale finally stood. His voice, calm but commanding, echoed through the chamber. "We do not guide. We do not intervene. We observe and we judge only by what you are willing to do yourselves. This council has the tools, knowledge, and experience to maintain peace, but it lacks courage, integrity, and unity. You govern not by vision but by fear and tradition. And fear will always be your undoing." A hush fell over the assembly. Even the loudest factions paused, struck by the weight of his words. Humans did not threaten. They did not demand. They did not promise protection. They simply stated the truth, and the truth, it seemed, was intolerable. For the first time in centuries, the assembly began to fracture in ways that no war, negotiation, or force could have achieved. The Kalthor warlords accused the VRNN delegates of conspiracy. The Luminaris questioned the SERWL's loyalty. Ancient treaties were declared void by tempers, alliances dissolved by panic. Chaos, which had once been contained, now threatened to consume the council entirely. From the gallery, a young Ziran delegate whispered in awe and fear to a colleague, "We are unraveling before them, and they do nothing. They simply watch." Indeed, that was the most terrifying aspect of humanity. They were not controlling, coercing, or even influencing directly. They were mirrors, reflecting the council's flaws so starkly that the delegates could not look away without confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves. To escalate the stakes further, rumors began to spread that certain factions had been planning to seize control by force, exploiting the humans' non-intervention as an opportunity. Secret meetings convened in shadowed chambers, fleets were readied in orbit, and spies moved among the delegates with deadly intent. Vorthen's frustration reached its peak. His luminescent form shuddered violently. "This is unprecedented," he shouted. "They are not threatening, yet the council is collapsing. How can mere humans, without fleets, without armies, without power, achieve this?" Kale's calm eyes met Vorthen's, and for a moment, silence fell so heavy it was almost physical. "Because power is not always measured by force," Kale said softly, yet his words carried like thunder. "True power lies in clarity, in restraint, and in knowing when inaction is the loudest statement." Whispers spread across the chamber. Delegates leaned closer to their neighbors, realizing the horrifying truth. Humans had shown them a form of dominance that no fleet, no weapon, and no threat could achieve. The council was crumbling from within. Their indecision, arrogance, and fear were being laid bare, exposed, and amplified. Then came the turning point. A suspicious alliance of VRWNN and Calthor delegates attempted a coup within the council chamber, planning to manipulate the procedural vote and seize leadership by exploiting divisions. They had anticipated human intervention would come to protect weaker factions, but Kale and Lyra remained still, unmoved by the scheming. As the coup unfolded, it became clear that humanity's non-action had a terrifying effect. Without interference, factions turned on one another in panic, betraying centuries-old alliances and revealing vulnerabilities that even seasoned spies had not predicted. The chamber erupted into chaos, a whirlwind of accusation, manipulation, and power grabs. Lyra, observing from her seat, allowed herself a faint smile. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it did not go unnoticed. The human's restraint was a catalyst, showing that inaction could be a far more potent weapon than any fleet. By the end of the day, the coup had failed, not because humans had acted but because the factions destroyed themselves. Alliances collapsed, plots were revealed, and trust evaporated. The council, once a symbol of interstellar order, had been completely destabilized. In a rare private moment, Sereth of the Luminaris approached Kale and whispered, awe-stricken, They destroyed the council, without firing a shot. Kale's expression remained calm. We did nothing. They destroyed themselves. That is the power of observation and patience. Even Vorthen, the High Chancellor, could no longer hide his astonishment. The Assembly's collapse was unprecedented, a crisis that would be remembered for centuries. And it had been caused not by humans' action, but by humans' unwavering presence and clarity of purpose. By the end of the week, one fact was undeniable. Humanity had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. Not by fleets, not by armies, not by technology, but by showing that the galaxy's greatest assembly, its oldest institution, was fragile, flawed, and entirely capable of self-destruction if left to its own devices. Delegates whispered, debated, and reassessed. Some admitted privately that the humans' approach was terrifyingly effective. Others feared it, knowing that no force in their arsenal could replicate the psychological impact of Kale and Lyra's calm dominance. And somewhere in the distance, orbiting the council chambers, the human ships remained small and unassuming, silent witnesses to the unraveling they had orchestrated simply by being themselves. The turning point was complete. Humanity had arrived as observers, yet they had rewritten the rules of engagement. They had shown that influence could be exerted without aggression, that restraint could be more powerful than force, and that clarity of purpose could unravel centuries of political and military dominance. As Kale and Lyra left the chamber that evening, the echoes of their presence lingered like a storm cloud over the assembly. The council would never be the same. And the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Underestimate humans at your peril. The echoes of chaos lingered long after the attempted coup and the unraveling of alliances. The Galactic Assembly, once a symbol of interstellar order, now resembled a fragile constellation of fractured ambitions and simmering resentments. Delegates no longer whispered about procedure or protocol. They argued over loyalty, competence, and survival. Every species sensed that the galaxy's stability hung by a thread, and that thread had been stretched taut by the mere presence of humans. Kale Vera and Lyra Solen did not speak of their observations, nor did they attempt to intervene in the disputes that raged across the chamber. Their silence, once unsettling, had become almost a force unto itself. To the alien delegates, it was as if the humans carried a gravitational pull, bending attention, focus, and even thought itself toward them. High Chancellor Vorthen, normally the unshakable fulcrum of the council, paced continuously at the center of the chamber. His radiant form flickered unevenly as he surveyed the aftermath. We have lost control, he admitted, a rare vulnerability in his voice. We are fractured, vulnerable, and exposed. And it is because of them. A murmur ran through the assembly. The realization that humans had not acted directly, yet had destabilized the council more effectively than any war or weapon, was sinking in. Delegates glanced at one another, searching for answers, strategies, or reassurance, but found none. The humans' quiet presence had done what fleets, armies, and negotiations could not. It had forced the council to confront the limitations of its own structure, judgment, and leadership. Sereth of the Luminaris, his glowing form dimming in contemplation, whispered to a nearby aide, They are not here to fight us, and yet every faction is at each other's throats. We are unraveling under observation alone. How is this possible? Lyra, seated beside Kale, allowed herself a faint nod. That small gesture was enough for some delegates to notice. It was not arrogance, nor was it pride, it was recognition. Humans were aware, always aware, and their awareness magnified the Council's weaknesses without a single word of condemnation. Across the chamber, factions reeled. The Kalthor warlords began questioning their alliances with the VRWN delegates, accusing them of plotting betrayal during the failed coup. The SEO hissed in anger and disbelief as trade agreements dissolved under scrutiny. Even the Luminaris, usually composed and rational, flickered nervously as old rivalries resurfaced. The Council was unraveling faster than any war could have achieved. In private chambers, smaller delegations convened, desperate to salvage alliances. But their efforts were futile. Every plan, every negotiation, every attempt to impose order was undermined by the same factor. Humans had forced the galaxy to confront itself. The delegates could not hide, could not manipulate, and could not deceive. Their flaws were visible, their weaknesses exposed, and their indecision rendered meaningless. Kale rose from his seat, walking slowly down the central aisle. His movements were measured, almost ceremonial. Each step echoed across the chamber, a subtle reminder that the humans were not bound by fear, intimidation, or expectation. Delegates instinctively parted, their voices quieting, their gestures pausing. Even the most aggressive factions, accustomed to dominating with threats or influence, hesitated in the face of Kale's calm authority. Vorthan tried to speak, but his words faltered. You are not threatening us. You do not intervene. And yet we are undone. How is it that a species so small, so insignificant in comparison to our fleets and technology, has brought the Council to this state? Kale stopped, turning his gaze to the High Chancellor. Because power is not always measured in fleets or weapons. Sometimes it is measured in observation, patience, and the ability to hold others accountable without action. You have all the tools to govern wisely. Yet you have relied on fear, politics, and tradition instead of courage, foresight, and principle. This Council has unraveled because it allowed weakness to masquerade as authority. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument, louder than any shout. Delegates stared at the humans, some with disbelief, some with fear, and others with a dawning respect they could not fully articulate. The humans had done nothing to coerce them, nothing to manipulate them, yet the effect was absolute. From the back of the chamber, a young Xeran delegate murmured to her colleague, "They don't act, and yet, everything is falling apart. They are untouchable." Indeed, the humans' influence had solidified without confrontation. They had turned inaction into a weapon, patience into a strategy, and observation into a force that no council could resist. The assembly had been forced to confront the fragility of its own structure, the arrogance of its leadership, and the superficiality of its perceived authority. As the hours passed, the chaos settled into a tense, uneasy order. Delegates no longer shouted or plotted openly. Instead, they moved like cautious predators, aware that every action, every word, every decision was being silently judged. Humans had not issued commands or ultimatums. They had imposed accountability simply by existing with clarity and purpose. Kale and Lyra finally stepped toward the central dais. They did not raise their voices, did not gesture dramatically, but their presence alone demanded attention. Delegates fell silent. Even Vorthan's flickering form dimmed as he realized that the humans were not leaving. They were simply waiting, observing, and letting the Council confront the consequences of its own failures. Lyra spoke, her voice calm but resonant. "We are not here to govern, to intervene, or to dictate. We are here to observe. And to show you a truth that every species in this chamber must face. Strength without wisdom, authority without principle, and unity without purpose are meaningless. You have all the tools to lead, yet you fail to use them. That is the consequence of indecision, and it is now your burden to bear." The delegates absorbed her words, many in shock. The Council had been destabilized and the truth was undeniable. The humans had not caused the collapse, they had only revealed it. And revelation, it seemed, was more powerful than any fleet or weapon in the galaxy. By the end of the day, the Galactic Assembly had been forever changed. Factions that had once been confident and self-assured were now cautious and introspective. Alliances were tentative, rivalries simmering, and the very concept of authority had been challenged. Humanity's presence had shifted the balance not by violence, not by command, but by clarity, patience, and moral weight. In the quiet moments that followed, Kale and Lyra left the chamber together. Delegates watched in silence as they departed, the calm authority of their movements leaving a lasting impression. The humans had done nothing overt, yet their influence was undeniable. Even High Chancellor Vorthan admitted privately to his aides, his voice tinged with awe and fear, They have changed everything. We are no longer the masters of this chamber. We are observers in their presence. The aftermath was clear. Humanity had not only survived the council, it had reshaped it. The galaxy had witnessed a new form of power, one rooted not in force, technology, or political manipulation, but in observation, restraint, and unwavering clarity. As Kale and Lyra returned to their ships orbiting the assembly, they looked down upon the council chamber, now a fragile web of distrust, fear, and reflection. The seeds of change had been sown. The galaxy had been reminded of the quiet strength of humanity. And the final act, the climax of this unprecedented encounter, was yet to come. Somewhere in the shadows, across countless star systems, whispers began to spread. Humans are here. They watch. And they will not be ignored. The stage was set. The council had been destabilized. The galaxy had been forced to confront its own flaws. And humanity, silent but unyielding, waited for the moment when the consequences of revelation would unfold fully. The Galactic Assembly, once a monument to unity and authority, now resembled a tempest of suspicion, fear, and fractured alliances. Delegates shouted across the chamber, accusations bouncing like shards of shattered glass. Factions turned on one another, old grievances erupted, and the very air hummed with tension so thick it seemed almost tangible. Amid the chaos, Kale Vera and Lyra Solen stood at the center of the chamber, calm as statues carved from the very essence of patience. Their presence radiated a quiet power so profound that it forced even the loudest delegates into temporary silence. No one dared to approach them. Even the High Chancellor, Vorthan, faltered, his luminescent form flickering in an attempt to assert authority. "You have shown us unprecedented clarity," Vorthan admitted, though his voice was tinged with disbelief and fear. "Yet you do nothing. You have destabilized the council without a single fleet or weapon. Why?" Kale's gaze swept across the chamber, encompassing every species, every whispered conversation, every trembling diplomat. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the chaos like a blade of light. "We do nothing because the consequences are yours to bear. Every failure, every misstep, every act of indecision you have allowed to fester has brought you to this point. We merely reflected your choices back at you." Lyra stepped forward, her hands folded, her expression serene. "We are not here to govern. We are not here to fight. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to observe, and to leave you with one undeniable truth. The galaxy's greatest assembly, its oldest institution, is only as strong as the wisdom, integrity, and courage of those who lead it. You have failed yourselves." A stunned silence filled the chamber. Delegates froze mid-gesture, mid-word, as if the very weight of Lyra's statement pressed upon them. Then, as if on cue, chaos resumed, but now it was different. It was not merely disorder, it was self-destruction. Factions that had relied on alliances now turned on each other, tearing apart agreements centuries in the making. Political scheming collapsed under exposure, and fleets once poised for intimidation withdrew in confusion. Even seasoned diplomats whispered among themselves, voices trembling. They didn't even act. And yet, we are undone. The humans had not issued threats. They had not promised intervention. They had not deployed fleets or activated weapons. They had simply stood silently, observed carefully, and allowed the consequences of the Council's failures to unfold naturally. And that was enough to topple centuries of calculated power. Vorthan, desperate to restore control, raised his voice. "Humans, demand command guide. We are at your mercy." Kale shook his head slightly. "We do not speak to control. We do not command to dominate. You are responsible for your own choices. The Council's collapse is a reflection of your own indecision. Take it as a warning or a lesson, it is yours to interpret." Delegates could not meet Kale's gaze. Even the Kalthor warlords, renowned for their fearlessness, felt an unfamiliar unease. Their entire species, raised on aggression and conquest, now confronted a force they could not see, could not strike, and could not manipulate. Humans had shown that true power was not in physical dominance but in awareness, patience, and moral clarity. In the outer galleries, young observers murmured in awe. "They do nothing, and yet everything collapses," one whispered. "They walk among us like gods, yet they carry no weapons, no fleets, no armies. How is this possible?" The answer was simple. Humanity did not play by the rules of the Council. They had brought no fleets to intimidate, no technology to manipulate, no treaties to enforce. They had walked in silence, observed, and waited, and in doing so, they had revealed the Council for what it truly was: fragile, fractured, and incapable of self-governance without exposure to accountability. Kale and Lyra turned slowly, walking toward the chamber doors. Each step was deliberate, measured, and serene. The delegates fell silent once more, sensing the significance of the departure. Every movement of the humans carried weight, and the quiet authority of their presence lingered even as they moved toward the exit. The assembly watched, helpless and awestruck, as the humans reached their ships. There were no dramatic gestures, no speeches, no fanfare. Kale and Lyra boarded their vessel with calm precision. The engines hummed softly, a subtle reminder that humanity possessed the means for power, yet chose restraint. As the ships lifted from the chamber, the light reflected across the crystalline walls, casting shadows that seemed to stretch across every corner of the council. Delegates whispered in awe and fear. They leave, and yet, their influence remains. We are changed forever. The silence of the humans as they departed became a weapon in itself. It was a silence that demanded reflection, contemplation, and accountability. Every species present felt the weight of their own failures magnified, as if humanity had planted a mirror in the council and left them staring into it. Vorthan, the High Chancellor, finally lowered his gaze, admitting what many had been thinking for days. They did not fight. They did not threaten. And yet, we are undone. The council is no longer ours to command. Across the chamber, the SROL delegates hissed angrily, Calthor clawed at the floor in frustration, and the Luminaris flickered uncertainly. Even those who had once considered humans insignificant now realized a terrifying truth. Humans were a force unlike any other, a species capable of wielding influence without domination, of reshaping entire systems without a single strike. In orbit above the chamber, Kale and Lyra watched the aftermath in silence. Ships of the council members, fleets once poised for intimidation, and delegates scrambling to salvage authority, all played out like a slow-motion revelation. Humanity had not interfered. Humanity had not coerced. Humanity had simply shown the galaxy the consequences of its own flaws. Lyra finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. They will rebuild. Some will attempt to restore control, others will exploit the chaos. But none will forget what they have seen. Humanity has arrived, and the galaxy now knows it cannot be ignored. Kale nodded. Our presence alone has rewritten the rules of engagement. We did not fight. We did not negotiate. We did not enforce. And yet, the council is forever changed. That is the power of clarity, patience, and restraint. As the humans' vessels vanished into the void of space, leaving the council chamber behind in chaos, whispers spread across countless star systems. Humans walk in silence, yet the galaxy trembles. They do not strike, and yet, they prevail. And in that silence, the truth became undeniable. Humanity had arrived not to conquer, not to rule, not to dominate, but to remind the galaxy of the potential of intelligence, restraint, and moral clarity. A species that could walk among the most powerful assembly in the galaxy and leave it in chaos, without firing a single shot, had proven a simple, terrifying truth. Humans were exceptional not because of technology or fleets, but because of the principles that guided them. The Galactic Council would rebuild, factions would realign, and power struggles would resume. But one fact remained immutable. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's quiet dominance, and it would never be the same again. Stars shimmered quietly in the void beyond the council chambers, as if acknowledging the arrival of a species that had changed the rules forever. The humans had walked in silence, observed, and left, a force not measured in firepower or fleets, but in clarity, courage, and unwavering presence. The lesson was clear: underestimate humanity at your peril.